And I just know my limits. Like, for instance, with that home-based business, I realized I couldn't do it all. And sometimes I try to do it all. And then I'm like, nope, it's not working. And I think that's the thing, is realizing what your limits are, basically, and what you can handle. Because sometimes I can't handle everything.
Yeah.
I try to, and I have bad days, believe me. But it's just finding that happy medium.
What's up, everybody? It's the Poorly Edited Podcast, the show where we put a spotlight on some of the most creative minds we can find, as best as a couple of people working out of a small studio space in Allentown in the Lehigh Valley can do. And I'm your host, Chandler Davis.
I'm Amresse Farrow.
And we're here with a very special guest, Beth Clausnitzer.
It's a mouthful. Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Very exciting.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Very nervous.
Yeah.
You should not be.
I'm so excited. I just want to say, I can't believe we haven't had you on already.
Oh.
This has been so long overdue. It's probably the episode that has been the most overdue that we've ever had.
Yes.
I'm like,
that you haven't been on this show
about?
yet. There's so much to talk about.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so extremely excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And I want to tell you how proud I am of you guys. This is amazing space. And you guys have really took your biz to the next level last couple of years. So I like to see how you guys have progressed. So congrats.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
You're welcome.
I think there's, there's always more to do. There's always more to learn. But I think the upward, always trying to push the boundary and try to do better and try to, kind of push the envelope is really important. And you've been doing that forever.
Oh.
You've been, especially looking at, because I wasn't aware until you kind of shared it with us. I wasn't aware of your background before producing.
Before it all
happened.
Yeah.
And, you obviously are someone who's always been kind of trying to push into new territory and always challenge yourself. And, you just really make things happen.
Well, thank you. It's funny because when I graduated college, I'm like, what am I doing? What's next? Where do I go? And then I took the summer off and I said, I'm working. Everybody's like, are you working? I'm like, yes, I'm working on my tan. I'm doing very well at it. And like in end of August, September, I got a job with Channel 69 right here in Allentown. I was an account executive. And I just feel like every 3 years, it seemed that I was changing a career path because I was not getting bored, but I thought, oh, there's something else coming.
Yeah.
And I thought, you never know until you go and try it. And so that's what I did. It seemed like every 3.5 years I would. It's like entrepreneurial.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I noticed that, like because I looked at the years too, and I was like, oh, like I noticed that pattern of it seemed like you're like, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
You're kind of like, all right, I got that. I did that.
But how you started kind of seems to in your education seems to kind of have led you now to where you are now.
Right.
And you went to school for communications. We both went to school for communications, and you focused on theater and film. And that's kind of where your passions were even back then in school, which I definitely relate in those ways. And you've kind of wound up there now because now you're working in film. Now you work in theater so much, whether it's through your children, through the community, through the producing work that you do.
I know it was weird because like I said, I wasn't sure where I was headed. And, my mom, especially, you know how moms are sometimes. They're like, what are you doing with your degree? You're not in your, what you went to school for. And I'm like, well, I'm just seeing my path. And I think everything happens for a reason. And I started out in TV and then I went to cable. And then everything sort of led to something else. So it was, should I go back or what?
Go back in time?
Go back in time.
Yeah, if you want to, you can go as far back.
This is like the worst math.
You can go as far back as you like. I read you brought up these little things, these cute little and interesting talking points about your life. There's so many interesting things about your life that I also didn't know until recently. So you've always been interested in theater and acting personally, and you met your co-star, became your husband.
I know.
How did that happen?
Funny? So I was always involved in summer theater called Sauk Valley Community Theater in Hellertown, actually, right where we were shooting that last movie. And the one show was called Brigadoon, and it's always like the same people who kind of audition for every show. So we were kind of used to everybody, and all of a sudden this guy comes. We're like, who's this guy? Where is he from? What's his deal? You know? And he just struts across the stage, and he looked like the Irish Spring guy, like Irish Spring commercial. And he was cast as Charlie Dalrymple, and I was cast as Jean McLaren. And the first thing he said to me, we were going outside after we were cast. He said, "Well, since we're getting married, our characters got married in the show. Since we're getting married, I guess I should know your name." So that's kind of how it started with him.
That's so smooth. Oh wow!
And then I was kind of dating a couple jerks. You have to go through some frogs to get to, you know. Your and I was dating this guy from New York, and he just was not nice to me. I met him like, I don't know, when I went to visit a friend, and we were dating, but it was mostly like a phone relationship. And I was just like, I'm over it. And I would tell Rob, my husband now, all about this guy, and he'd be like, he's not nice. I would never treat you like that, and all this stuff. And then I thought Rob was too nice, because I'm like, how could someone be so nice? So anyway, we did the show together. And 4 years later, we got married in real life. And in those 4 years, we did a couple more shows together. Titanic, we did Hello Dolly, we did Jesus Christ Superstar. And we try to do shows whenever they're around. We just did Brigadoon again. This is a funny little tidbit for all you theater people. So Brigadoon came to the Municipal Opera Company of Allentown right here on Hamilton Street, Scottish Rite Cathedral. And we're like, well, let's audition. And our son Christian is also in theater, and he auditioned for Rob's part that he had 25 years earlier. And he got Rob's part, and then I got a little part, and Rob got the lead. So I always say Rob does it to be more professional, and I do it for fun. But we kind of mash and mix up. Yeah. So that was that story of the theater part of it. But I've always loved theater, and I would do theater if we could. Just time consuming right now, but I would love to do it if it presents itself.
Yeah. And film and theater have just seemed to be such a constant in your life through all the many different things that you have done and the skills that you've grown over time.
Yeah.
Film and theater has been a professional and personal passion for you.
Yeah.
And your family, and you and your husband have really turned your own kids into turn your kids onto that.
Guys,
yeah. You have theater and film family. Like the whole family is just extremely talented.
Oh, thank you. It's fun. We do have fun. We sing all the time at home. In fact, Christian's leaving for college on Wednesday, and everybody's like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. It's just going to be really, really quiet at home because he's just always singing." But I wanted to say, because you were equating like theater and film, and it is so funny. They kind of do go hand in hand. And the very first time, we can talk about this later, but the first day on the set of Getting Grace, I was there as an extra with my kids, and we were on a bridge right at Monocacy. And the first AD said to me, "Okay, you're going to pretend your kids are going into the creek, and you don't want them to go in the creek." And he told me what to do. So, background acting in film is way different than it is on stage. Yeah. And so I was like, wait, hold on, don't go in. I was super elaborate and super big. And so they had to cut, and they're like, you don't do any of that. They're like, bring it down, to here, because theater and film are just so
right. So that was your first experience working on camera, or when I was at Channel 69, I did commercials. You did commercials.
Yeah, I helped produce commercials there, and sometimes we were in the commercials, Rob and I, just because it was easy and cheap to do that. And then I wasn't in any.
Especially not of a feature, and not what more, I guess, dramatic.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting. It's such an interesting thing, and I studied it a lot when I was in college, of just the similarities of theater and film and how married they are, but also how different the skills translate when it comes to certain aspects of it. And that's one of the most fascinating things to me. And I actually didn't know that because I was more familiar with film acting than I was stage acting. I didn't really understand how stage actors did what they did. And then when I learned about the whole how they have to, and then observing early films and seeing how they were applying theater tactics to acting on camera, because like all of that is just so fascinating. Yeah,
that stuff is similar, you know, hitting your mark and back to one, and all that. It's just way smaller on film than it is. At least for me, that was my experience.
So your first experience was with Getting Grace, because you hadn't started as a producer before your time on Getting Grace, Daniel Roebuck's first film with a channel piece.
Right. So 4.5 years ago now is when all craziness started. That's what I say. And so a producer of Getting Grace, Sam Edwards, is my neighbor, actually. It's kind of weird how all of this is connected. Sam Edwards.
She's your neighbor?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I actually went to I went to Preston's birthday party a few years ago before I ever met you.
Oh.
And I was right next to your house, and I thought I recognized your house the first time I ever pulled up.
Yeah.
And that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
It's such a small world.
It is a small world. And the way that whole thing happened is Sam's brother, Mike Molesky, met Danny on that plane trip that started this whole thing of, you know, him investing into Getting Grace. And Danny was coming back to the Lehigh Valley to help fund Getting Grace, and he just happened to meet this guy on the plane who happened to be Sam Edwards' brother. And that's kind of how it all started. She called and she said, I'm producing this movie. Can you be an extra? I'm like, sure. Grab the kids, go to the park, play baseball at the park. And while we were doing that, we saw Michael Owen, who you have interviewed before, just really diving himself into his job. His job for Getting Grace was extras casting. And he was just running around the park like crazy, trying to keep everybody where they needed to be, because there was several different locations of each group of extras. And he just was like sweating and just looked really beyond help at that point. And I just said randomly, I'm like, are you okay? Is there anything I could do for you? And he was like, oh, I could really use an assistant. And then Sam Edwards hears this and she's like, oh, she would be great. And then it kind of just like started from there. And you know, Michael Owen's attention to detail. So he just shows me this computer program of like 500 names and everybody's categorized and all these extras. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just get myself into?
Yeah, his detailed spreadsheets for Getting Grace extras was something that I still reference today.
Oh, yeah. And so that's how that all started. And from there, that day, I met Danny, and I just became Michael's assistant doing extras. And people say just doing extras. It's way more work than you might think. And so I think I put myself really into that role. And from there, Michael Owen started his movie, Control, and he asked me to come aboard to help produce that movie. And that's kind of how that started.
And Control was completely different, because Control was a period piece.
It was a period piece.
Way different.
It was way harder in a sense because, Getting Grace was modern day. You know, when you do a period piece, it's all vintage clothing and it's vintage cars, and it's you have to look for locations that look older. And ours was set in the 60s, like, so you think of Jacqueline Kennedy era, and you know, just the clothing, it was so beautiful, and visually the movie really looks beautiful. But I just seem to have connections with that stuff. Like my Aunt Loretta collects 1 million decades of clothing, and she has warehouses of just props, and you know.
Oh wow!
So I was lucky in that sense, because I was able to like give all the wardrobe for free. We were blessed with locations and wardrobe and people. Yeah.
And a big part of being a producer is over a long period of time, growing your network and your contacts and who you know, and you know, nurturing those relationships to be able to help each other out when the time comes. And that's something that you are so excellent at.
Oh, well, you know, it's like, I like to say networking, but also it's just like building relationships. And we were just talking about this before, is who you meet. It's not how you can help them. It's not how they can help you. It's how you can help them. And then that philosophy kind of translates into the bigger picture of who else out there can I help you with? And then it kind of turns into.
I think a lot of people tend to approach that the wrong way. You know, they have it flipped. And it leads to very, you know, I think kind of two-dimensional relationships, and then also by nature two-dimensional outcomes.
Right.
in how those things pan out. You know, when you're only looking for what other people can do for you, you're just going to find that I think there's less fruitful, results that come of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also those relationships tend to fizzle. Also, it's like, because now the person's like, well, I'm done with you. You did what you could for me, and now I'm done with you, or whatever. But
those genuine relationships are very, very important. And especially in this industry, people can really see and spot the difference from a mile away from the people that are just looking to take and get as much as they can out of you versus the people that are just willing to give and give and give and rarely ask for anything. And you are a person that that is brought up all the time when you're not around. I think Cuba mentioned it on the show the other day, or if he didn't on the show, it was off camera, but saying that you are always, so when we were walking out after the show, he said to me, he was like, I've got to call Beth. You know, she called me the other day just to check in on me. And he just looked at me. He was like, isn't that weird? I was like, no, that's the type of person Beth is. He was just like, I've never worked in this industry that someone just called to see how I was doing. And that thing comes up about you a lot, that you call and you're like, hey, I had a second. I just want to see if I could help you on anything. Yeah. And it's in the most, genuine, beautiful, intentional way. And I think that that's how you've had such an amazing career, is that's the kind of energy and spirit people want to have around themselves personally, but also within their productions.
Yeah. I think it's not just business wise. It's just, I feel like I do that just because I like the people and I want to check in on him. And especially for Cuba, he worked so hard, and he was just, I know he took so much time away from his family, and I know what that's like. And I just wanted to be like, oh my gosh, how's it going? Did you, recuperate? Did you, are you spending time with your son? So I just wanted to check in.
I think the good news is that that having that kind of approach is so good and really stands out, because I think at least especially in this industry, and a lot of times in the business world, it is an uncommon kind of person to encounter. It's an uncommon kind of type of relationship to have. And so that's the good news. But also then the bad news is it's an uncommon type of dynamic to have. So you have a lot, you know what I mean? So it's good because the good people do stand out, but it's also very tough because for the good people that have that approach, they're constantly being met with the other side of the fence as well. What's your angle? Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think that's the best advice you can really give anybody that's either starting out in this industry or that even have been in it for a while. It's just that building relationships and building them on just a genuine foundation of love and respect and wanting to support each other's passions is so extremely important.
And wanting people to succeed, like I see you guys and I'm like, wow, they've come so far, even in a year and a half, 2 years that I've known them, and I'm proud of you guys. So the Thank foundation you. Of doing it just as a look at Lizzie's treat people with kindness. I mean, that's just basically it. You be a good person, and it will get you sort of far. Exactly. it'll get you
sort of far. It'll get you I was just curious, as a producer, as someone who a lot of producers really build their work off of the relationships they have, the connections that they are able to make, that network that they have. How do you keep track of such a big network? Because I know that when you're building, it can be kind of very
binder.
It can be easy to be. It can be easy to be a good friend or family member or professional contact when you only have a small circle and you only have to check in on a few people every now and then. But when you grow so much bigger and you don't only have a pretty big network, but you have a very good quality of network in the way that you keep up with them. How do you keep up with that network? How do you remember? Do you take notes? Like, I just have to remember to check in on this person. Is it all mental? Like, how do you organize all of these amazing personal and professional relationships you keep track of? Because you seem to do that very well. And I've never seen you miss someone. You don't you think of everyone. I've never seen you make a mistake where you're like, I forgot of them about that. I forgot about them. So how do you organize it?
I'm conscious about that only because I feel thank yous are the biggest thing you could do. People work harder for praises than raises. That's what I say. And
that's a gem. That's a gem. As Cuba would say.
Because you just have to make people feel appreciated. And so as far as remembering people, I do keep, I'm old school still. I'm working on my modern technology skills, but what works for me right now works for me. You know, you hear about these casting directors from New York who have binders and binders of people that they've casted or need to cast, and they'll remember, oh, in binder 6 on page 87, I know Chris is available and he's 60 years old, you know.
Wow.
So, and that's exactly what you do.
Yeah. I just remember, I don't know where it is in my notebook. I do. Like, it's funny because people
so you do keep physical, literal physical tabs on where everyone in your network.
Every movie have a stack of stuff. And then I'll be like, they're like, what's the phone number for, you know, Rick Bockel, who was the Christmas City and you know Santa Claus, and I'm like, I know where that is.
Exactly.
You did that on set. You did that on set of Purple Heart. So we were on set for 5 days. Obviously, I think there was 2 or 3 months pre-production you had before that.
Yeah.
So that's still a lot of time that you put into that. But we saw you do that so many different times where somebody needed a phone number and you were like, I wrote it down here somewhere. I know exactly where it is, and you were able to pull up in a second. And that is very impressive, and I was impressed by that. But what I found more impressive was working with you for 1.5 years, 2 years on the Hail Mary pre-production and a Channel of Peace pre-production, and seeing you be able to do that over a span of 2 years. And Daniel would be like, I need this. And you'd be like, 8 months ago, I met someone in a deli counter line and they said they had access to that. And, you know, I check in on them every now and then. I'm like, how do you organize all of that and follow through with it?
I think it's the follow through is the biggest thing, because people will think of stuff. And for me, if I don't do something right away, I'll either forget to do it or it will just bypass and I'll remember like a week later. So I tend to say, if I'm thinking about Chandler, I need to call Chandler or I need, you know, to email him or something. So I find if I do it right away, then that helps out with that process. But yeah, it's funny. I think also is with producing, I always say producer equals problem solver. So for instance, this one movie we were working on, the actor called me at 5 a.m. saying that he didn't feel well. So at 5:30 in the morning, I was like, what do I do? We need him. He has lines. He has, you know, 3 scenes to be in. So I just went through my casting Rolodex and I found somebody, and just so happened that they were available, and just so happened they fit the wardrobe, and just so happened it just all worked out that morning. So it's just, you have to just think, how do I help this situation? How can I problem solve this? And kind of that's what a producer does. How
do you manage that when you're whether it's pre-production or production, but when you're on set and you're the producer and 1,000 people are coming to you with that kind of situation, but it's all happening at once, and I've seen you handle that with grace and respect and positivity so many times. How do you organize that in your mind when that's happening to you, but tenfold?
I know it's hard, but I do see like the big picture of stuff, and I'll say, well, that has to be done, but this is more important. I have to do this first and take care of that. And then, you know, then I can get to this part. Or so I don't know. I do see what needs to happen, and I just do it, because if you don't just do it, like I said before, you'll forget to do it or whatever. So I just kind of just do it on my own. Sometimes I ask people to help, which is great. But I know, like, if I just do it myself, I'll just get it done quick. But, you know, I guess I just like to connect people. And that's part of producing, is finding, like, the one thing we needed was like an 18-wheel tractor trailer. And all of a sudden I just was online, and it just so happened something popped up. This person in my feed popped up, and she was taking pictures with her 18-foot tractor trailer. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know this person, but I'm going to reach out to them and just say how crazy this is. And it just worked out. So I also would say, just do it. The worst people can say is no. And my feelings aren't hurt. They're not personally saying no to me specifically, but no to maybe to the situation they can't help out with. So I just say, put it out there and just ask.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Don't be afraid to ask. Like with Control, like you were talking about with the period piece, I did have the connection to wardrobe, and then I did have connection to some locations. And, you know, locations when you're doing a film can tend to run thousands of dollars if you had to really pay. And so just having a couple connections, we were able to get those locations for free. But people often ask, well, what does a producer do? Like, what is, and it's coordinating departments, it's coordinating catering and props and set design and wardrobe and you know, locations, just cast and crew, and you know, it's just coordinating. So that's basically And if you're a good producer, you have most of that done before the day one you start shooting, because that's all stuff that needs to be. Pre-production is huge with any film, and the more prepared you are, the better I think the shoot goes. So we're learning still, and I'm learning a lot still too. So, especially, that
makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Pre-production is so important.
Yeah. I think that, obviously when I met you and then working on set with you and everything, I really, and not that it isn't a long time, because 4 years is a long time, but I thought it was 14 years of experience. You know what I mean? Like with how seasoned you seem to be, and how far your expertise spans when it comes to producing and everything. I thought you had been doing it as your career for an indefinite amount of time, but I think that both directly and indirectly, everything you had done up until that point of doing that for Getting Grace and then after, really is what solidified you and solidified those skills that now at this point you could come into that ring and excel so much. Because I mean, you were an entrepreneur. You worked in the New York fashion industry.
So I had a dress boutique in Bethlehem. You're probably familiar with the Main Street Commons building where Bethlehem Brew Works is. So my store was it wasn't the basement, but it was in the lower level. And it was called Beth's Boutique. It was called Beth's Main Street Boutique, but every time I answered the phone, it was like a little bit of a mouthful. So it's Beth's Boutique. So I had that for 3.5 years. And so you learn everything that's behind the scenes of owning your own business, and the hours and the time commitment and purchasing. And so I would go into New York, and I would go to the fashion district, and I would go to the wholesalers. So you have to have like a special card to get into these stores, which was fun because you're going in and it's just like a mass room of clothes, head, top to bottom.
What year? Can I just ask what year was this? Or years?
I remember because it was right before 9/11. Well, it was right before 9/11 that I was closing. So Christian was going to be born. So it was like 1999, 2000, 2001.
Wow.
Yeah, around then.
Wow.
And then I really loved it. It just was a passion I always kind of wanted to try. And fashion's really hard to maneuver. But I think my niche was, say you were going to a prom and you were looking for a lime green crystal dress. So my mission would be go into New York and say, okay, where can I find this lime green crystal dress in your size? And I did have a really great tailor that could tailor everybody's dresses, but I think that's what people liked. I would write down in a book what they were looking for, and then I would go and I would specifically shop for them. So I became like a personal shopper almost.
It's really the attention to detail that you have that has transferred over in every single kind of industry and profession you've had, and now. And your ability
to just make, for better, lack of better words, make plays when it comes to those kinds of things. Like someone has a problem and you're always able to kind of figure out how to get from point A to point B and connect those dots and then get them what they need. And that's very, now that you say that, even in that realm, that was very much how you were tackling that industry. And then obviously that translates to what you do now.
The one that I really remember that was most meaningful to me, and it was sad, but it was, this caregiver was taking care of this elderly person forever, and she wanted to be buried in a lavender 2-piece pretty dress, and she was passing away. She was in hospice, so she didn't pass away just yet. But the caregiver said, oh, if you could find this for me, this would be in the world. And so I did, and she loved it, and she ended up passing away, but she put her in this dress. It just meant so much because she really wanted this, and that's what I found. So that was nice.
Wow.
That's kind of my favorite one. But the other ones, on a happy note, was the prom dresses. And I became known as the girl with prom dresses that no one had, because they would be one of a kind.
That's an amazing reputation.
That is in the prom industry, when you show up and like two other girls with the same exact dress as you, they had the same like Maggie Sotero as you, and you're like, what am I doing here? So finding a very unique outfit is so extremely important, especially in fashion. That uniqueness is part of your your identity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I just had like a range of just unique things. And I think that's what people liked. So, but the only reason why I closed, well, two reasons. It was very time consuming. So when I couldn't be there, because the mall had certain hours, so I couldn't be there all the time. And I have a very busy social schedule. So I had, I had to always find people who are trustworthy, to work for you. I did have one problem with a girl who was stealing, but for the most part, I had really good girls. And it just was very time consuming. And then also I was pregnant with my first son, and I just didn't want to bring him back and forth to the store and to New York. And so I thought, let's close, because it was my 3.5 year mark where I was like, what's next? Okay, maybe what next is being a mom for a while. But then even after being a mom, I was like, I was getting ready to do something at home, even though being a mom is really hard and
it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. I was like, what else could I do? So then I started those two home businesses. And they were great to keep me busy as well. So I always had to be doing something.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by our services here at Lab 212. We offer photography, short videos, along with social media and communications consulting. Need headshots, portraits, senior pictures, a short video for your website or business introducing yourself to your audience? Or do you need help figuring out how you should be running your social media or how you could better focus your efforts? Or maybe you just need help finding the most efficient methods of project management for your film. We have you covered. Visit lab212.com/services and let's get collaborating.
So as someone who always has to be doing something, how do you, and obviously you navigated, being a mother and everything that entails, which is probably the biggest challenge for the people who, I would imagine one of the biggest challenges for people who have to always be working and being productive. How do you find that? Because it seems like your mentality isn't just that keeping busy doesn't just mean kind of toiling away at a job that you've pretty much mastered, and you're challenging yourself still. And what is your approach, or what do you look for when it comes to those challenges, that you're trying to set for yourself? What are you trying to accomplish, in your journey of figuring all this out?
So for each thing I feel like I've done in my life, like these two home-based businesses, the first one was jewelry, and I did fine. I did great in that, but and I was working towards one of the levels in the jewelry. So I made it to the level that I wanted to, 5 diamond design or whatever the heck it was called. And then I was like, okay, now what? And then I went on
did it. Yeah, I love that. I love that so much.
Then I went on to Arbonne, which is a skincare, anti-aging is like a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm like, well, that's consumable. That'll be better than jewelry because it'll be consuming and people would need to reorder.
Right.
So then I got to that level that I wanted to get to. And then I also had a second baby. So I felt like with home-based businesses, I was so busy. I was either being a really good mom or a really good business person, but I was kind of splitting myself too much. And so I had to back off on that. So
that's a really interesting concept that you brought up. Whether you're either a really good mom or a really good business person.
And some people do it and they're fabulous at it. But for me, I was doing this business 24 hours a day in my head. I'm like, who can I be calling? Who can I be following up with? Who needs a reorder? What program are we going to listen to next to better us? What books on, how can we, what books should we be reading?
You're targeting us right now.
Yeah.
I totally relate.
I read one book a year. I'm just kidding.
It's like, it seems like the hardest thing ever. Like to that dilemma of, there's this and there's this, and you can never be amazing at both if they can't coexist at the highest efficiency you'll ever want.
Something had to give.
Right.
Being a perfectionist in that, and being a person that wants to just give your all and halfway is never good enough. Not only for yourself, but for the people around you, what you think they deserve. Being the best community member, being the best wife, being the best mother, being the best employee or entrepreneur that you can be. And it's like, and you don't want to give at all. How have you learned to manage that now? Because I see you now And I see you now just giving your all as every single thing.
Yeah.
And I see, you know, you being an excellent mother and you being an excellent entrepreneur. I don't know about that. Ask my kids. You're very dedicated to
comments.
Yeah.
They'll be in the comments. Yeah. Oh, God.
Like, I don't think so. I'm sorry. Because I have 3 teenagers now. Cassie just turned 13.
Can I just point out that she just threw a Bob Ross themed birthday party.
That's amazing.
Like, that's pretty top tier.
Well, that's the thing, though. I sourced that out. Like, I found a lady who did Bob Ross. Of course you did. And I didn't have to do anything. That.
Be like, I did all of it myself.
I will give a shout out if anybody's listening. Angela at Out of Our Mind Studio in Emmaus was fabulous. I saw pictures online and they all had the Bob Ross wigs. And I'm like, how are they going to give those to somebody else? COVID, I don't know. But you walk in, everybody had their own, you know, brand new wig, their own thing, their, you know, what they're going to paint, and it worked out really well. She loved it. It was fun.
That's so funny. And that's amazing.
She's an old soul. She loves Bob Ross still.
But that's the kind of thing that I mean. You still go above and beyond and go all out for each thing that you do, whether it's a personal, whether a personal adventure or a professional thing that you're going after. What is the organizational process look like, and what does that look like in managing all of those things? Because I think that's something that comes up all of the time, is how can I be an amazing partner to the person I'm with, and an amazing family member, and an amazing business person, and feel totally fulfilled all of the time, and still give to the community.
Well, it's that hardest question, and we ask a lot of people that come on, because I think there's no one has it figured out. No one has the right answer. It's like, what is that work-life balance, and how do you navigate it? I think it's contextual for everybody.
It is. Like I said, for me, I know when my limits are giving, you know, and, you know, I am backing off on a few things right now. And I just know my limits. Like, for instance, with that home-based business, I realized I couldn't do it all. And sometimes I try to do it all, and then I'm like, nope, it's not working. And I think that's the thing, is realizing what your limits are, basically, and what you can handle. Because sometimes I can't handle everything. Yeah, I try to, and I have bad days, believe me. But it's just finding that happy medium, trying to do it. Yeah.
So really, a matter of not overextending yourself, not putting yourself in positions that are unfavorable, where you're going to have to really choose, between, you know what I mean, like not trying to put yourself in those. And I'm sure that they come up. I mean, as much as, I try to navigate that, it still happens. Like, you still find yourself,
because you want to help,
right?
And you want to be there.
And you don't think about that many steps ahead, that, oh, maybe this could, you know what I mean? But it still can happen. But yeah, I think that is a really big deal. And just giving yourself time to, because I know you've asked this like 5 times after the Purple Heart shoot, like if we were okay and if we were resting. But I think
you guys are running around like nuts.
But I think it is important, like, to give yourself. A lot of people burn out because they think that, I mean, and there's a lot of glorification to it, and there's also, certain types of people, that just like to work and just go and go and go, but they don't realize that you have to because
first of all, your mental health is the most important thing. And I have a whole other story about that with my background.
You don't hear that often, especially when it comes to, film shoots or many different things, that it's just like the suffer for the sake of suffering, and that you have to pay your dues, and that seeing someone basically suffer to their limit is like, they're earning a badge, and like seeing them like, oh, this person did an amazing job. I didn't see them sit down once for 5 days straight. They look like they were always about to pass out, but they were still working. And to me, that doesn't look like that's not like here's a badge of honor for you compromising your mental health and your physical health to not take care of yourself.
I don't know if, sorry to cut you off. No. I don't know if you saw or noticed or whatever, but the last day of Purple Heart, I had to leave, and I was gone for a few hours because I had a little mental breakdown, just like you were saying. All these people were coming at me with 100 different things, and I'm like, I just lost it, and I just broke down. And then a couple things happened with tennis balls, and then I'm
so sorry I set you up for this. I was the tipping point for that. I was like, hey, we need tennis balls, and you were like, I'm done.
Then I was like, I know where I can find tennis balls.
And you still made it happen. You were like, Michael, I've got tennis balls right here.
And because for him, and this is just a side note, and I had a discussion already.
That was actually like the beginning of that was my fault, because I remember I went to get tennis balls, and I was like, there are are no tennis balls. Like, had I just not said, like I was the first person.
Lab 212 is the reason that Beth has to step away now. And she had a nervous breakdown. We are public. This is our public apology video.
Honestly, that was just like the tiniest thing that just... And it wasn't even a big thing.
Well, it's a great example because it is such a benign, seemingly small thing.
But what I will say, though, for Michael Owen, who is in charge of his own department, he felt these tennis balls were going to be safety-wise and also not to nick up floors or whatever was the best solution. So he's the one that makes that decision, and everybody, you guys were trying to help him get that done. But, you know, it's like, so producers and directors sometimes do this, and you have to have a good enough relationship that you can talk it through. Even though you're screaming at each other 1 minute, the next minute you'd be like, all right, I understand your side. I understand why you did this, and let's start.
So you really feel that's a part of it? You know, that butting of heads, like it's kind of inevitable because of how high intensity the situation, how high stress it is. And everybody in the long run is trying to do what's best for the production. Your way of doing it might be a different way and might go this. My way might be like this, but maybe you don't see it that way. But so I'll tell you why it's going like this instead of, you know. So I had a little mental breakdown and I went home for a couple hours, took a cold shower, and I came back refreshed and ready to go.
Yeah. So, I should say that I've seen this happen with people before where they get to that point and it you know, no one is above this. It has happened to every single one of us that you are mid-production, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in an office or something has happened where that's the little tipping point where it's very hard for you. And it's not comparable to anyone else's, you know. Oh, and no one else can say to you, well, I was able to stick it through the entire time, because you're not going through what everyone else is going through. You're not in the same mindset, and you don't know what the other person had to deal with. You don't know how many things the director threw on you, or you don't know what it is. So you can't compare. But I've seen so many people get to that point and they walked away and they never came back, and they're like, I'm done. And being able to be like, I'm at this point where I'm not in a good place, and I know that I need, and figuring out exactly what you need. Hey, I need an hour. I need 15 minutes in the bathroom. I need to check my phone. I need to put a song on. Hey guys, I need one mental health day away from the office. I'll come back in a day or two. Being able to say, hey, here's what I need, and then I will 100% be back in the time. And being able to gauge that to know when you are going to get back to the point where you can
and you'll
work
be so
well,
much more productive.
Is very important, because that's so important to know yourself. And it's about knowing yourself, your own limits and your own boundaries, and making sure the people around you respect you and your boundaries and what you need.
And sometimes I struggle with that. Not with that, but I struggle with my personality of just being, I want to help everybody, and I have a mom mentality, and I can fix this, I can fix that, I can fix that. And I have to know my limits of, you also have to have a thick skin too, because there will be different personalities, there will be different ideas. So if you have a little bit of a thick skin, which I'm working on, sometimes I take everything personally, but I have to realize, no, they're just upset because, you know, something wasn't going right away, and I'm trying to help them, and it's not working. So having a little bit of a thick skin in this business helps also. So I'm learning that.
That's an understatement. Having some thick skin is definitely an understatement, I'm sure.
I think, and I think that it seems, at least to me, that this kind of conversation about that, because I think that conversation, not just a few years ago, was only about having the thick skin as the only catch-all, but the conversation is now becoming much more about, well, sure, that is a factor, and it is, but, you know, there is that mental health aspect, and there is that taking a break aspect, and that needs to be normalized, not just talked about. It needs to be normalized where people will not catch ire because they're trying to
better themselves,
and they're trying to take care of themselves. You know, it's like, we need to normalize that now. That, because
I 100% agree.
My career trajectory before I switched majors was going into the programming field and then the tech field, and very much so just within the last 4 years, up until the last 4 years, the mentality in that industry is time crunch. You know, when you're in a crunch, you're sleeping under your desk, coding all day and night, and work, and all these development software companies, that's how they operated since the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's not good,
No,
you know, and
there's no
really
sustainability. There's no like,
they probably have a lot of turnover, I would
they
assume.
do.
Yeah.
And they do.
Mm-hmm.
They have people that just burn out. And then when they have a child, it's like the end of the world,
Yeah,
you know, because now they have to take some time to take care of their newborn.
I'm
you know,
glad
like
you guys are
crazy.
thinking that way right now.
Yeah.
Before even family, because we already said this, but it is so important for your mental health to be in check. And if it's not, everything in your life can go awry. So it's good at your age, because your age sometimes are like what you were saying. I'm not. Well, you guys do this sometimes. I'm not sleeping. We don't go to bed.
Here's the thing. Sometimes we do that.
Sometimes you just have to.
Sometimes you have to, but we know how long we can do it for. And I've gotten to those points too, where it's just like, I'm gonna work really hard, and you were like, oh, I didn't. And you called me up. You're like, did you sleep last night? I didn't sleep the last 2 nights. I know that I can push myself really hard for a week or two, because I know that I know what the schedule looks like in 2 more weeks.
Right.
And then I've got nothing for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I've basically just like really light in office days. And then I know I have that time to decompress, you know.
Well,
but you know, that's not a thing that we figured out until this recently. You know what I mean?
Like this year, I didn't get to that point.
Because we had been in that position a lot. We were like, I don't understand. Like we're just going, and then we get really irritable, and things start to go wrong because we're not focused. And it's like, oh, you know what I mean?
And get mad at each other.
And there used to just be and I'm glad that we're talking about it even in front of you, because now I think you won't have to call us up as much worried. We're trying to take care of ourselves. So you don't have to worry.
Okay.
But I think it's just not something you talk about. You talk about these things at home when you get home,
and that's bad
with your husband or your friend.
It should be talked
you don't talk about it at work. You never bring it up to your boss. You never bring it up to your employees. You never bring it up to your professional peers that you respect. Like, hey, what are the things you're having a hard time with? And they're like, we don't talk about that.
Well, that's why you guys have such a good relationship. You can do that with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and you talked about that. You talked about on set, you need to have strong relationships with people for when this happens or when you need to go, hey, I need to take an hour. You know what I mean? And you need to be surrounding yourself with people you trust and that you really rock with, so that when things get tough, it's not about when things are easy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, then it's easy. But when things are tough, that's when it's the most important that you've surrounded yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And it always will be
don't lie
tough.
to yourself and say there won't be. Cuba said that in the beginning call before the shoot. That first call, he was like, we're going to lead with love, and it will get tough. There will be tough moments. Everything may seem like it's going well, but there's always going to be a hard time, for maybe not for you, but for someone. And it may come at a different time. Always remember that and be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Whether you're on a shoot or pre-production or post or whatever industry you're working in, that's always going to happen.
Very good at that. Yeah.
And that's why, that's why every time coming off of a production like that, everyone's like, hey, anytime, let's work together, and whatever the next thing is, I'm
maybe
good to go.
a couple days later.
Maybe a couple days later. Yeah.
I am never doing that.
Everybody walks away from set after the wrap up party, and they're like, hey, nobody call me for the next 48 hours, guys. Yeah. And then in 48 hours, I'll be happy to take your call.
But at the end of the day, you know that you went through that, but you went through it, thankfully, with good people. Because if you would have went through it with not so great people, it probably would have been way worse.
Way worse.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this so many times, but it's just, no matter what industry you work in, but especially film production, the underlying force of everything has to be respect, and having respect for everyone, no matter what your position is or how much that person has worked or how much you've worked. Having respect for everyone is so important, because you have no idea how far that respect and that mutual respect for each other will take you. And even if you don't understand their job or everything that entails, still having respect for it and not thinking that yours is more important or that yours is harder or physically or mentally more demanding. Just be respectful, and it's just everyone's going to walk away a lot better, and the production and the quality of the production will be so much better because of it.
Because everybody's working together. And what I loved about like Purple Heart is watching the progress of you guys also, and like little Luke Nixon, who was so green coming into that set, but he kind of really, really took on through those 5 days. You could tell that he changed by the end, and he was like a different person as far as his experience goes. But I like that part of it too, is following everybody's journey.
Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
5 days.
Yeah.
Because it's like, because you're like, oh, I feel like we've been filming for 3 weeks.
It feels like summer camp.
Anybody listening to this that hasn't been on a set and they're like, why do they keep talking about something that was 5 days long? 5 days was a lifetime. It was almost, I think it was 70 hours in 5 days.
And you know what?
That's what
we
it
were
was.
Actually lucky because normally the call times are like 6 or 6:30.
Yeah.
And the first day was 6:30, but the other days.
I was very happy when that wasn't the case.
Let's do 8:30.
Yeah. 14,
Thank you so much, Beth.
Average of 14-hour days every single day. Pretty crazy, but.
And I will say, that's typically the norm of film sets because they only have a certain amount of time with each location, certain amount of time with talent. And so that's kind of how it goes. But I just had a thought and escaped me. I will remember.
In the meantime, so going into the pre-production part of it, which is my love. I love, you're not as interested in pre-production.
I think it's very important.
I love pre-production. I love the organization. I love all the little nerdy facets of making it all come together and the communication of it all. Because when you get onto a set, and whether it's like a day or 5 days or a month of shooting, like everything that happens that you see there is a direct result of the entire team that worked in pre-production. And it takes organization and it takes communication and it takes a lot of attention to detail. How do you organize pre-production?
Oh boy.
Like, let's get into like,
that's a loaded question.
Like what programs do you use? Is it all, do you write it down?
My program
like, do you write it do you write it down? How do you organize communication? How do you communicate between different departments? What does that look like for you? Because I'm fascinated by every individual producer's work ethic and how they decide to structure their pre-production.
So I think an important thing, oh my God, I am so spacing out right now, but hold on a second.
You're okay.
Pre-producing. Oh, this is what I tend to do. So sometimes I jump way too far ahead as a producer because I'm like, well, that needs to be done and this needs to be done, but we have to do this, this, and this for that to be done. But sometimes I go to the end before I do the steps prior. So I think learning how to do that. What do we need to get done first? First thing is budget normally, because if you don't have a budget, A, B, C, and F can't happen. Sometimes that works backwards in some projects, but so I think if you find a way to see what needs to be done, like I just know now, wardrobe has to be organized, catering, props, script breakdown. I know all that needs to be done, but what's the most important thing right now that needs to be done besides having a budget? I would say locations, because if you don't have a location to shoot, you're not going to have it. I would say once you have, also before that, I would even say cast to cast it and see if people are available. If not, you have to, work backwards.
Yeah.
Crew, who you're thinking of, who's going to be the most beneficial for this particular project you're working on, who's going to bring the most strengths. And that would be another thing that I work on first is crew.
So okay, you said a lot there. So budget. So how did you learn? This budget is hard. Yeah. Budgeting a film, and it never works out exactly how you expect it. You should always double or triple it. Yeah. Whatever you expect the budget to originally be. How do you plan, like a little bit of a brief, like how do you do budgeting, and what kind of skills have you needed to have to be able to do that properly?
I will say I use Google Sheets for budget, and so I'm very proud of that fact. Nice. Instead of my Mead notebook.
Google Sheets. Man.
Now, for me, luckily, the past few movies that I've worked on, we've had locations paid for. Our wardrobe was already taken care of. The biggest thing is if you're paying your actors and also crew, what the breakdown is for, with that. You okay?
Yeah, I just choked.
Okay. We're like hyperventilating here with
breathe.
Is this visual and scene and audio? Okay.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube, Spotify.
No, it's okay. You're okay.
You've shot several episodes, like sitting right off to the sidelines with us.
I forgot.
That's true.
You've been around for so many episodes.
When we're all wearing masks, the only thing you see are people's eyes. So
your eyes do look really nice. Your lashes are always the one thing you show up on point. Always.
I don't like to wear a lot of makeup, especially in the summer, and I'm like, well, lashes will help. So That's the one thing I spend.
That's good, and then that gets factored in the budget.
That's
the first thing that goes on the budget is lashes for crew,
because I need to not be worrying about makeup. That's funny because something broke, and I'm like, that goes in the budget. It was personal of mine. Maybe it was a purse strap or something like that. But so the biggest budget thing is crew. The salaries are the most. That takes up the chunk.
Do you normally have? Or does the director tell you, or do you decide what you have allotted for the crew, or do you have to wait to figure out who you're going to crew and what their deal memos are going to say and what they are like, here's my day rates? Or
it's a little bit of all of that. Yep. A lot of people we work with are super talented and their day rates are astronomical. I could never pay some of these day rates, but they have a passion for this. And if there's a project they would want to work on, they don't mind being paid X, Y, and Z. And if that's our budget, we say, this is our budget. Are you interested? Because if they're not interested, then we'll move on to someone. Right. But a lot of people, and I've learned this, I do this myself, it's experience, and what this project might lead to this project might lead, which has happened to me throughout the 4 years.
It's happened to us constantly.
So, I went from extras casting to producer, but then I went, not going backwards, but then I went to, unit production manager. I wasn't a producer on that film, and then I was associate producer, which is a title, but it's a title. And then the next one was producer again. So you just use experience to get you to the next project, and sometimes it doesn't come with a huge paycheck or a paycheck at all, but the experience that you get from that you'll take with you to the next project. But a little bit of everything of what you said. So the people that we work with typically just have a passion for this, and they love to do it, and if we can give them something on the side, that's even a bonus for them.
Is it hard signing on to projects as a producer, knowing you don't really have a wrap time? I mean, when you're crewing up and you're on set of production, you have an in and out time. You're like, here's your first day, here's your last day. But when you're a producer, you're kind of always on for pre-production, production, and then oftentimes in post. So is that hard signing up for a production? And they're like,
could be like never ending.
Exactly. You're like, we're supposed to make the movie this summer, and then it doesn't happen for a year or two more, and you're still on that project. So how do you make the decision to join a project when that could potentially happen? How do you feel comfortable with being paid what you're going to be paid, even if you could go over? How do you make those choices? Because being a producer is so heavy in the involvement, and you don't ever really get to walk away from the project,
right, until it's wrapped in the can in the movie theater, but then you're also doing media and advertising afterwards. But for a few projects, I have a pre-production rate, hourly rate of what I get paid. And then once I'm on set, it's a separate rate. But I see the project, and if I believe in it and I see there's a future with it, some projects you're not sure, is this going to happen? Is this going to come to fruition? All this work, is it going to come to fruition? But when you have a project that I stand behind, I see a future with it, then I tend to say, okay, I'll stick with it. Even if I'm, not being paid a whole lot, I know something's going to come out of it. I feel something's going to come out of it in the future. So I stick with it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beth, I think there's a lot of people who probably would be watching this who would feel a lot of relatability to you and your trajectory, or people who are aspiring to kind of have the kind of trajectory that you've had over the course of your career. And is there any like a little nugget of advice that you could provide to somebody who's sitting there listening and they're like, well, I admire so much and respect so much someone who has the tenacity that you do, and that was able to excel in so many different fields and to try so many different things, and what is the guiding principle you kind of have that's taken you through all this journey, that's navigated you to the successes that you found?
I mean, I would just say start doing it. If you have local, like we're fortunate, we have FIFO, whatever they're calling themselves now. We have connections in this area. And I would just say just go to either meetings or get involved with production companies such as yourselves or other production companies. And how can I help? And like I said, it might be non-paying. You might be a production assistant for a while before that leads to something else. But if you work hard and you show up on time, you do your job, you're never late. You just do what you're told. And even though it might suck in the beginning, it's going to lead somewhere if you put your heart and soul into it.
And that even applies to
anything, really.
To anything, not just film. Yeah.
But this, you really have to love it. And I'll tell you, some days I do not love it. And those are the days I do need a mental break. But you know, I keep every project I say, oh, I'm not doing that again. And then, you know, something will happen. I'm like, oh, all right, I'll help you because I know something that will help you. I was telling Chandler, we're using that house, hopefully, for Lucky Louie, the one in Hellertown.
Really?
Yeah.
The house, yeah.
He went to go see it yesterday.
That's a whole story.
That's a whole story in itself.
That's so funny.
I didn't know what house it was, and I randomly knocked on like 2 houses.
You went back
to literally
because I
knocking
couldn't find
on
that
doors.
posted, and I'm like, how can I? Because I was in Hellertown, I'm like, I might as well stop. And then I randomly knocked on the door and I said, does Jennifer live here? Yeah. And it was the son, and he knew exactly what I was talking about.
So
and so
next time you come on the show, we'll tell everyone how I met her.
How that story happened. Yeah.
Next time.
But that's what happens. It's like if I wouldn't have knocked on her door, we wouldn't have, you know, started this whole ball rolling. And so he went to see it. He loved it. So we'll see.
So you just have to go after it. You just have to try. You have to talk to everyone. Don't be afraid. And give it your all.
Work hard. Yeah. Don't slouch off. I don't know.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Beth, thank you so much.
Welcome. This went by fast. I was so nervous.
I know, right?
Like, what are we going to talk about?
It's easy. It's easy.
And I have 1,000 more questions after we stop rolling. Yeah. I'll just talk to you about.
My question is, why does your mask stay perfectly still and mine is like horrible?
I'm fixing it. But that's... I don't know.
It's different.
Have Lizzie design a mask for you.
It's different material.
I do have one that I wore around my neck for the shoot. And honestly, I did forget about it sometimes. So I don't care if anybody says, put your mask on, because that's safety. Yeah. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. Yeah. So that was one thing. But I do like that one because I could breathe a little bit better in it. But I forgot to put it on half the time when we're talking to people. Put it down. Anyway, that's side note. But I like yours because it stays up. So.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thanks you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are awesome.
If there's anything you'd like to plug, anything you'd like to shout out, anyone, let everybody know.
Well, there is a movie coming. If there's anybody local that is interested in working on Lucky Louie, Daniel Roebuck's coming back hopefully in September. Tentative scheduled dates are September 21st. It's supposed to be like an 18-day shoot. Weekdays and weekends. I know people's schedules are nuts. So if anybody's interested, reach out to Lab 212 and they can reach out to me if they're interested. And then Hail Mary is coming up next summer, hopefully. So we'll see how that goes. But it's all up in the air.
Yeah, everything is. Everything is.
Yeah. Stay well, stay safe, and go for your dreams.
Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Poorly Edited Podcast signing out. Catch us and the rest of our episodes on Spotify, iTunes, the video version on YouTube, and have a great day. As Beth said, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.